Live from London, it's Plank of the Week with Mike Graham.
Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week. It's Friday night and this, of course, is TalkTV, the home of common sense. And this is the one place where you don't have to worry about judging anything because we'll do it all for you. And there's been an awful lot of plankery this week. Jeremy Kyle is here. Alex Phillips is here. And, of course, here is Steve, the one and only, from Virgin Radio, Denyer. Shall we get on with the show?
Why not?
Jeremy Kyle, over to you. What's your first nomination?
Far be it from me to want to win for the third week on the row.
Yeah.
That piece of scum, Bob Vylan, has to be right up there. Let's just have this as it is, right?
Yeah.
There is no space in this land for hate speech, right? You look at what he did at Glastonbury, death to the IDF. We know all about what's happening in Gaza. We can talk about October the 7th. The people can tell me about the children and all that. But let's talk about the reality, OK? Yeah. Any form of racism is abhorrent. But why is it acceptable for that to be allowed to be broadcast on our balanced, not state broadcaster? Yeah. Death to Jews. Lucy Connolly, we know the story. A mother of one from Coventry, languishing in jail 31 months. She wrote some very inappropriate and wrong things about the Muslim community. Yeah. I would have thought community service, learn where you went wrong was good.
She got a much smaller audience.
This piece of whatever was not only allowed to do that, he encouraged those unwashed middle class, probably off their heads, kids to join in. And worst of all is the BBC allowed it to happen. And we found out a day later that Tim Davie, the Director General, they came up to him and he was there in the VIP and they said... And he said, well, not on demand, but just leave it. This was left on streaming. Yeah. That is an
for hours.
That, for me, right? Yeah. I'm beyond talking about the BBC. I think they're a joke. But this bloke, this piece of... who's been dropped by his agent... Yeah. And do you know what did it when I was on air? And I was really angry about the whole thing. Nothing from our fascist government. Nothing at all. No. We were talking about it. 20 minutes after he woke up, in the White House, Donald Trump had revoked their US visa. He said, I don't want that in my country after that tirade.
Let's have a look at the actual... Let's have a look at the so-called performance by this character.
Dreadful.
Death to the IDF! Death to the IDF! Death to the IDF!
Any form of racism is abhorrent, but why the hell is it acceptable, right, to call for the death of Jews, the most persecuted race in the land? I'm not saying that everything about Israel is perfect, but people will talk about, quite rightly, if people have a go at Muslims or Islam or whatever, that is absolute blatant racism, and it was broadcast on our state.
Can I just say, like, from a music point of view, I mean, Bob Vylan, there is that, but also they did post just before they went on stage and said, BBC, are you sure you want to do this?
Right.
Did they?
Also,
they did.
Yeah, and also Kneecap, who, of course, we were expecting
they
to
were supporting Kneecap, weren't
but they posted and said, look, guys, if you're going to come down and see us, get down early. Get down
to
at
see
least.
This.
I think it was all part of a master plan.
But also, you know, we were talking about this, with no television, there will have been run-throughs, there will have been sound
They would have known.
They would have seen this stuff.
Would have known.
The BBC would have gone, this is an important cultural event that we must broadcast. And the point is this, right, OK? So those scumbags, and also didn't Kneecap actually call for, like, rioting on the streets of Westminster, which is direct insurrection. And, death to MPs. I mean, look, I slightly disagree in terms of more for free speech and shouting about death to the IDF. In his stupid, idiotic mind, he probably thinks he's talking about the soldiers without realising that about 500,000 of them are just volunteers who are conscripted, ordinary Israelis. But I wouldn't expect that moron to understand the nuances.
That's not his
of this
real
stuff.
name, of course, is it,
But
Bob?
also, no, he's called, like, Jamal Pascal.
He's called Pascal
McVinney
Robinson Foster, and he comes from a middle-class family in Hull and went to private school.
Of course he did.
He's just a rancid. He's a rancid creation. I'm so glad his record label, his agents dropped him. America, no visa. Watch you disappear into insignificance. Because, I mean, my big bugbear with this is the fact that it's just effing crap, isn't it? I mean,
not good,
forget what he's talking about on the stage, which, you know, free speech, whatever.
Yeah,
the
but
BBC,
I mean, the
if
point
anything
is,
else, would have pressed the dump button. But it's actually just rubbish.
But it is rubbish. But the point is, a lot of stuff at Glastonbury is rubbish. That was his Instagram post, by the way. Why are we paying to send 500 people down there?
How many millions are spent on live broadcasting that rubbish Nuremberg rally?
Right.
You know, I don't want to watch it.
That is the other problem with this guy, is that they knew about him because the BBC have been using this guy since 2006,
they made
apparently.
Him, didn't they?
And also, there's another clip which hasn't been shown, which I don't think we have here, but I saw earlier this week, and it's of him before he did that death to the IDF, and it's him telling a story of how he worked for a guy, and he describes him as this fat, bald Jewish bloke and he was obviously a Zionist. And I saw his name on it, you know. So it was really like it wasn't
He's a
just that
scumbag.
chart.
No, but
He was being very. So they could. He wanted to dig up Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah.
You know, that's also okay for the BBC. You know, and the thing is that you know they could have prevented him at that point when he started talking about the fat, bald, horrible Zionist bloke that he used to work for. You know, they could have pulled the plug then, but they didn't.
Do you know what I think is really scary as well? On the show that the following day, when I sort of calmed down a bit, we had Jonathan Saradotti on, who's a leading Jewish broadcaster.
Cool.
And I asked him two things. I said, do you think that what Netanyahu's doing has made it impossible for Jews? And he said, listen, there's a whole debate about that, and there's a lot that we are not, as a nation, happy about. But this is what he said. He said, I was born here, and for the first time in my life, people in my community are scared.
Yeah.
And if they see Glastonbury and they see those people chanting, maybe it's time for us to go. I think it's disgusting.
Yeah.
I think it is absolutely wrong to make those people feel that they don't belong in this country.
It's absolutely disgraceful.
Whilst we're opening our arms to anybody from any
Well,
community.
exactly right. Let's have a look at what Lisa Nandy had to say. She suddenly woke up this week.
Our national broadcaster, which is funded by the licence fee, which is paid by the public in this country, has broadcast something that is deeply, deeply offensive to a community in this country that has made many, many people feel and may actually have made them unsafe.
Yes, and of course you could have been very lucky if you'd been at Glastonbury, because not only was Tim Davie down there glad-handing it, supposedly he reckoned he was going down there to see the staff, because you probably don't see any of them in Broadcasting House in London, because they're all working from home. No, they all work from home. But when Glastonbury's on, they can certainly go to that. But do you know who else was down there making a little speech in one of the little tents off to the side? Do you know who it was?
Keir Starmer?
Gary Lineker.
Hey!
Gazza was down there, he was trying to talk about how we should be less divisive.
All the top brass of the Third Reich.
Yeah, and we should all be less divisive and we should stop hating each other and all of that crap. Meanwhile, there was another Jeremy down there who was the one that was, in fact, Jeremy Corbyn. Have a look at this.
Look on the wall right over there that surrounds this wonderful festival. And there's a message on that wall for President Donald Trump. Build bridges, not walls.
What an absolute plank. So he's actually said, right, on that wall over there, there's a message to say, don't build walls.
They had watchtowers, chicken wire fence, and 400,000 people able to be, given temporary accommodation in tents at the same time. I'm like, I've got a really good idea for the boat people. Maybe they should all go to Worthy Farm if they care so much about wokery and the boat people. It has been proven that you can create a secure premises with food stands and a load of leftists who are going to pander to your needs.
Load of tents.
And a load of tents.
Yeah.
Well, that solves the problem, doesn't it?
Well, it's easier to break into Britain
say.
than it is to break into Glastonbury. That's obviously true. Right, Alex, over to you with the NHS.
Calm, dear, calm.
I remember back in the day when I was wheeled into an operating theatre for an operation when I was about 8 years old for a hernia. And I came out and thankfully I did have weight. Yeah, I fell down some stairs or something where guts popped out the wall or something, I don't know. So I had to go for an emergency hernia. And I get wheeled out onto the wards and then they got the names wrong, being an Alex. And they told my mum, your son's going to be going for his circumcision very soon. Well, it turns out that the NHS haven't really learned many lessons since then.
Who said that a woman can't have a penis, you see?
I know, right? Yeah, I was ahead of my time, as I often am.
Yeah.
But the NHS haven't really learned much since then, because despite the Supreme Court going on biology, the NHS is still insisting that its midwives are trained in chest feeding for parents.
I don't know how they're getting away with this. It's supposed to be against the law now, isn't it?
Well, so what is it? I mean, first of all, right, is this catering for just the one person who's had a mastectomy and is a woman who's still giving birth and now identifies as a man? Or, who is this for? Or is it for, quite frankly, the narcissistic, sick, perverted weirdos who are male-born, who then take a load of hormone supplements to produce breast milk in their male pectorals?
Except it's not breast milk, is it?
It's gross.
No, it's horrible.
That is literally going to poison kids. I'm sorry.
Some posters I think I can show you. Let's have the first one. Birthing people, there you go, ain't all women. They are, actually.
They are.
So that one's wrong. Cross on that one. Birth workers.
Have they actually got LGBTQ with a hijab? Because I'm pretty sure those things are mutually
that's wrong
exclusive.
as well. Number 3.
Oh, come on.
What is happening there?
What's that Romulus and Remus from Dystopia?
What's that all about?
Oh, God.
What is going on there?
It's just gross. It's all
He looks
gross.
he looks like a sumo wrestler, that guy.
We had a midwife on. Oh, didn't I? 28 years experience. thrown out because she said to a couple, couple of years ago, after 20 years, she said, congratulations on the birth of your son. And they went nuts and said, we'll decide the sex of our son. And wrote to the hospital. She got an official warning and she just said, I'm not doing this anymore. What has gone on with... I mean, honestly, maybe...
But the thing is...
Steve, help us out, right? What has happened?
Why is Steve there? Is Steve like NHS Steve?
I
What has happened,
haven't been
Steve?
in the hospital since I was circumcised, so I couldn't tell you about that.
Well, we got some interesting facts.
I would have expected... You didn't really want to know that, Mike, did you?
No, not really.
I didn't...
That's 2 circumcisions. We've only been on for 5 minutes.
Anyone else wants to... Have
not
you
me.
been?
Well, I had a testicle removed from testicular
What about you? Are you
cancer.
fully intact?
Yeah, I am actually.
Okay. And also,
I thought
my
you knew that.
non-existent penis is still fine.
But
Yeah.
you're right. I think in this climate, I presumed that this wasn't a thing anymore because
Yeah.
of the law change
Yeah.
recently.
Yeah.
But apparently the NHS is holding out, though.
So
And-
seemingly
Yeah.
it is, but I would have thought...
Did I read something
all of
about
this would have
Ofcom
been
this
reversed.
week
You
as
did,
well?
yeah.
Did I read something about
Yeah.
Ofcom? The thing is, I've said this, and a lot of people here don't agree with this. I don't care what you are, right? What I rail against, as I started the show with, is my kids being told by some speaker that you know, net zero's the answer, that Brexit's a disgrace, that Donald Trump should be impeached and that a woman can have a penis. It's like we've decided that we're OK to live in a society, in a world, where everything that
It's
to me
wrong.
is norm. I don't mind differentiation, but stop trying to destroy everything. I said to my kids the whole
Yeah.
time,
But it's also-
Churchill was a racist. She
Yeah.
wouldn't be
I'm sorry,
here.
it's also,
I know.
you know,
It
when
annoys
women...
me.
I mean, even the SNP have now finally admitted up in Scotland that they're going to have to adhere to the Supreme Court ruling that actually a woman is only a woman if she was born a woman.
The minute a woman thinks they want to conceive a child, it's like, you can't drink, no prawns, no soft cheese, no this, no that, no cigarette, all of these things. You must be a complete pure nun, you know.
Yeah.
No prawns.
You know, shellfish or something, isn't it? With like, I don't know, I haven't been knocked up yet, but, you know, I know that the rules are pretty stringent. And yet, if you're a man, it's like, yeah, you know, pump me full of hormones so I can have stuff coming out of my nipples and I can force this baby to suck on my teats. It's really deranged. No one's done any studies into what this is doing in the long term to kids, apart from the ones that have
had
been
it on
done.
my Weetabix once.
Breast milk.
Yeah.
How did it taste?
Awful. Very sweet. Green.
Didn't somebody make cheese out of it?
Yeah.
There was a story, wasn't there, a while back? Somebody made cheese out of breast milk.
Don't do that.
Yeah, it's
some
like,
of that on your
Wasn't there a
Weetabix.
thing a while ago where people like frying up their placentas in omelettes and stuff as well?
I don't
that
know.
was like a
People-
Onions.
Goodness
I mean,
me.
Things
this
that
is, I think,
shouldn't have
this is when you
happened.
realise that the human race is starting to reach the end of days. You know,
I don't.
They've
But my,
started-
but
they've
my point
started
is,
to go
I mean, I
insane.
think that's weird, right?
Yeah.
But I'm actually have you weird feeling, but you are not until my dying breath going to tell me that everything that I was brought up to believe in is so wrong and archaic it's going to be cancelled and trashed.
Yeah.
I think there's a man and a woman. If your sexuality is different, that's your business. But I haven't met a woman with a penis. It's ridiculous.
But the other
You should go to
problem is this
Thailand.
stuff's dangerous.
Anyway,
I'm suddenly
listen.
thinking, have I, in the middle of that sentence?
Yes, I've got a few stories, but...
In the middle of that sentence, I was thinking, maybe I have.
You just don't know. That's
Yeah.
the thing. Anyway, listen, let's get back to the really, really important topic.
It's all been
This
about
was-
penises and
I mean, I think
circumcisions.
we need to get away from all
Yeah.
of these the
No more
genitalia
genitals.
references. I'm going to talk about the weather, right? Because it's been a very big week for weather,
Yes.
as you can imagine. Funnily enough, the BBC just the other night, I think it was Monday,
Told us it was snowing.
I put it on. No, I put it on the BBC just occasionally, just for a laugh, over the news at 6, and they led on the weather. The whole story was about the weather for about the first 4 minutes, right? And they didn't actually mention climate change for about the first 3 minutes. But they finally did get to climate change. And they had a woman standing in what looked like a very nice sunny sort of field somewhere, talking about how hot it was, because it was quite hot. But it was lovely, you know. But here's what really ground my nuts, and it was the Liberal Democrats. It was the Liberal Democrats who decided that, you know, this was such a crisis that we should have a COBRA meeting. Right? Now, COBRA meetings are only normally called when there's a terrorist attack, some kind of major, you know,
National
industrial
emergency.
strike,
Yeah.
national emergency. It's called COBRA because it's named after the Cabinet Office briefing room, right? That's what it's called. And not a lot of people know that.
Not a lot of people know
Not
that.
a lot of people know that.
Cabinet Office briefing room A.
Yes, thank you.
Otherwise, it'd be covered.
But, excuse me.
Yeah.
It's his show. He did it perfectly. Don't try and be smug.
No, she can be as smug as she wants.
It's
She
Cabinet
wants-
Office
just trying to
briefing
get a
room
reaction.
No,
A.
yeah.
Men
It's
can
room A.
breastfeed. Deal with it.
Yeah. Anyway, Ed Davey, who we haven't seen out and about for ages,
No.
and doesn't seem to speak out about very much, was so concerned about this that he was demanding that there was some kind of, you know, national emergency. The heatwave lasted 2 days. It was Monday, it was Tuesday. Yeah, it was a bit hot and it wasn't very nice on the tube. But, you know, there are parts of Britain where people were getting in touch with me going, it's pouring with rain here.
Also,
it's about 15 degrees. You know, bring it on. Let's have some global warming. Yeah.
Why do we moan? It's too hot, it's too cold, there are too many there's wind, there's leaves on the line. Honestly, I was on the tube, must have been 40 degrees, thinking, it's a bit hot. It's a bloke in a parka.
Also, by the
Bloke in a
way,
parka.
like about 3 years ago, there was that day that it got over 40.
Yeah.
So now, unless it starts with
like
a
it
4,
hot?
I don't care. I love it hot.
The thing
I've actually got some weather statistics here, you'll be pleased to know.
hello.
And I can tell you that
Yes.
actually it's been hotter than it was this week on several occasions. In 2022, in July, it was 40.3 degrees.
That's the one I'm talking
That's the one
about.
you're talking
Yeah,
about.
I'm quite precious.
It was 38.7 degrees in 2019. It was 38.5 degrees in 2003. You know.
And what about the year when I was 11, 1976?
76, it was well above 90.
That was the year I was born.
Yeah,
Also,
90
what was it
degrees.
like in 1538? Well, we weren't measuring it then, but it was probably also still hot.
But they actually, the BBC, I'm going to show you a weather map now. Have a look at this. This is the BBC's weather map. And it looks
It's on
as though
fire.
literally...
It looks like there's been a massacre.
Everywhere apart from Ireland and the west of Scotland, which is always miserable. And here it is. Look at that. I mean,
That is
Britain,
so dramatic.
basically South East England is on fire. But
27.
they basically concluded that they said, you know, with very sort of serious faces, they said on BBC, well, of course, you know, it used to be that we'd only have a heat wave every 1 in 50 years. Now we're having it 1 every 5 years. And you're going... What are you talking about? We've been measuring it for about 200 years. So
Yeah,
they don't
it
even
was
know if
hot
that's
for a
true.
couple of days.
Yeah.
Just crack on, yeah?
They only invented climate change about 20 years ago. I mean, how do they know?
If you go back on social media, on Facebook, they've got this thing called memories. So you can see what you posted on this day going, you know, back years. You know, 10 years ago, I posted heatwave going on, you know, 5 years later there was another one. Last year we didn't even get a summer. We didn't have any summer.
But that's also
did we?
climate change.
Quite right.
This is the clever thing, right? Because first of all, I remember when I was doing geography and they told us, first of all, there was a hole in the ozone layer. Where's that thing gone?
Yeah, it's closed itself up.
Done.
Yeah, it's healed.
Over. Then I was told there's
somehow.
going to be acid rain. There never was.
No.
Then all of a sudden they came out of global warming.
Yeah.
And then someone went, yeah, but do you know what? It's pretty chilly this summer. Well, we better change that to climate change.
Yeah.
If it rains, it's climate change.
Yeah.
If it snows, it's climate change.
Yeah.
If it's hot,
If it
it's
floods,
climate change.
it's climate change.
The fact that actually all this extra CO2 in the atmosphere means that the planet is greener than it's ever been in the planet's history. We've got more vegetation,
You'd definitely
more
be my
plant life,
environment secretary.
and also that polar ice cap up there, that thing didn't even exist for about, you know, hundreds of years. That only
Because it's
invented
melted.
itself. Well, no, it wasn't even there.
You're hitting me
It was
again.
so hot
Yeah.
it wasn't there, and now it
Would you like
popped
to
up.
see?
Now it's on
Would you
the...
like to see how we used to do the
Oh,
weather?
come
This is back in 1983. Have a look at this.
Britain's been basking in the heatwave again. In many parts of the country, it's been hotter than Hong Kong or Honolulu. At Liphook in Hampshire, it was 92 degrees, the highest recorded temperature of the year so far.
A lot less was being worn in the Welsh capital, Cardiff, hottest city in Britain today, with an official maximum recorded at 91 degrees Fahrenheit. If the bathers felt sticky, the chocolate biscuits in this Cwmbran factory felt downright mutinous.
Do you know,
I mean, that was
I
Michael
remember-
Burke. That was Michael Burke there, absolutely loving the fact that it was hot. Instead of going, oh, it's hot.
The thing that I picked from that was, because I'm 60 in a minute, is... Did you have those shirts that the collar was white?
Yes.
And the shirt was a different colour.
Yes.
Do you know what I picked from
And the
that?
cuffs.
And the
cuffs were white.
Cuffs were white.
Yeah.
Collar was white. The rest were blue or pink.
I took two things from that. First of all, when
Ridiculous.
did we use Fahrenheit? Was that like a thing back then?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Old money.
41, but I
Old
I
money.
was brought up on
You and I have had this
centigrade.
conversation before.
But
Do you
also,
remember?
I just remember the days when you could go to a beach. Did you see all those people sitting on the beach in Cardiff? No one was stabbing each other and no
No.
one was getting raped.
No.
Slightly
I mean, those
worrying,
were
though.
the
Is
good
there a
days,
beach
weren't
in
they?
Cardiff?
There is a beach in
still
Cardiff.
in
You don't want to go there.
There's
no.
not.
If you go to Cardiff Bay, there's a
really?
beautiful hotel called St David's
I know St David's Hotel. What, they put an artificial beach in front
I've
of
been
that
to
thing?
Swansea
No, but
Docks
when
with a woman I can't tell you about.
when the tide goes out, there's a beach.
Is there?
Trust me.
I used to live in Cardiff.
I spent a lot of time there.
I
Did
lived
you?
there like
Yeah.
1,000 times.
On the Gower Peninsula.
On the Gower. Well, I
Yeah,
went there
you
as
go
well.
up there, you go up to the Jurassic coast of Wales.
Yeah.
Like
and
Greta
all that.
Thunberg.
Sorry, we haven't got a lot of time for the travel part of the
No.
show, I'm afraid. It's time for it's time for Steve Denyer.
Hello.
Meghan Markle.
Meghan Markle's jam, ladies and gentlemen. She just ended it there, shouldn't I?
Oh, God.
So-
We've gone from lactation to jam.
I'll be looking, this is my big moment.
Okay.
So she has released this under her As Ever brand. And actually...
Boring as ever.
Well,
Rubbish
as it
as
should be
ever.
renamed. Rubbish as
She
ever.
was saying she created this in in her kitchen.
Yes.
Which we all know wasn't her kitchen.
No.
It was a set, wasn't it?
It was a set.
I think it was just.
And even the friends weren't her real friends. They'd actually been paid to be there.
Well, it turns out the poor people making this actually live 2,000 miles away in
Illinois.
Illinois.
Yeah.
So there's probably people kind of chained up to radiators.
Yeah.
2,000 miles away.
It's a factory. It's a
churning
factory.
out this stuff.
Yeah.
He did wait.
Anyway, here it is. This is Meghan telling us how happy her jam makes everyone.
Truth be told, I had just been making a lot of jams and preserves at home and sharing them as holiday gifts with a lot of friends. And it was one morning, beginning of the new year, so many friends at the same time had texted saying, I don't know what it is, but your jams just make me so happy.
Why? Would it be obvious to people?
How can jam make you happy?
Depends where you put it.
Yeah, that's true. What? Yeah, very well said. Because she also brought out some rosé wine this week, didn't she? Which was first brought out as well, rather unbelievably, coincidentally, on the same day that Princess Diana was born. How on earth do you think
Do you think that was a coincidence?
Of course it wasn't a coincidence. I mean, what's Harry thinking? And also the other great story this week was about Harry talking to the Queen and having a very, very bad session with the Queen, upsetting her for 10 minutes. And she apparently said that she was worried that he was besotted with this woman. And she said, you know, he's obviously not very bright. And he's not very strong.
And this is right at the beginning of the relationship.
And she is both of those things. So I think the Queen nailed it in one there, but there we are. Right, well, that's off to a very interesting start. We'll try and keep it a bit more sensible during the next part of the show. Coming up, we're going to be talking about the big story of the week, the collapse of the Labour government. I know it hasn't happened yet, but it might have by the time the show comes out. And, of course, another grooming gang leader who hasn't been deported. It's all coming up on Plank of the Week.
Live from London, it's Plank of the Week with Mike Graham.
Welcome back to Plank of the Week. So far, we've got some very, very good starting material, but I've got the best one, I think, of the week, and it's going to be very hard to beat this one. Keir Starmer, you know, the Prime Minister of this country at the moment. I'm not quite sure how much longer he's going to last. You know, this is a guy who actually gave big interviews at the weekend to the Sunday Times, The Observer, gave one to the New Statesman, talked about how, you know, he realised that there were some things that might not have gone as well as they could have gone. For example, when he was away at the G7 and when he was away at the NATO summit, he didn't realise that there was a huge rebellion being planned behind him by all of his backbenchers who didn't want him to vote through this welfare bill, which was going to take, you know, disability payments away from disabled people. He said he was distracted because he was at NATO. Then he said he was distracted about when he made that speech about feeling like you were in a land of strangers, which a lot of people thought he was finally saying something true about, you know, all the immigrants in the country. He said he should never have said it, but he was distracted because somebody had firebombed his house. And you kind of go, well, I suppose you could be. I can see why you might be distracted by that. But it's all very weird, right? Anyway, this week, he comes back from, or beginning of this week, he comes back from the NATO summit, suddenly realises that he's about to be kiboshed by his own backbenchers. And so he suddenly goes from being, I'm not going to talk to them, I think they're all just making noises off, I don't care about them, I'm going to just push it all through, to suddenly going, oh, we're going to listen to you. And we're going to see. And so when he came out today, or rather earlier in the week, to go into Parliament for Prime Minister's questions, this is how he made his entrance. Have a look. Now, can you imagine if you're his, like...
It's like Hamza Yusuf on the old thing, isn't it?
It is.
I wish the cat was under this. I wish Larry the cat was sitting there like, yeah.
We're going to be playing this for the rest of time, right? We're going to be playing this for the rest of time because only Keir Starmer could get that so wrong. You know, it's like you've got one thing to do, come out of the building, try not to stumble because everybody thinks... And walk to your car. Maybe they should, you know, maybe they should bring the car a bit nearer so that, you know, he doesn't have that problem.
I think there were some really unedifying scenes, weren't there, in Parliament this week? I mean, he sort of, in the end, he had to backtrack so much that it's actually cost the country even more. There'll undoubtedly be tax rises. We saw Rachel Reeves quite upset, didn't we, earlier in the week?
We've got some footage of that. Let's have a look at that because no, this was in Prime Minister's question. She was sitting behind him, right, and she was in tears basically. She looks awful, doesn't she? I mean, she's aged about 30 years, right?
Yeah, that ain't a good look.
And one of the reasons that a tear started to roll down her cheek was when he was asked by Kerry Badenoch, you know, is your Chancellor still going to be in a job, you know, come the next election?
It was that moment, wasn't it?
And it was that moment. And suddenly the tear rolled down and he wouldn't say that she would be still in the job. So he basically didn't back her. So I think it looks very like, not only is Keir Starmer a dreadful Prime Minister, but he's meant to be a friend. He's obviously not much of a friend either.
I don't have much time for Rachel Reeves or Reeves or whatever, but at that moment I thought to myself, you really are a piece of work, Starmer.
Yeah.
You've put her out there.
Yeah.
You've pulled the rug from under her feet.
He's done that thing.
Whether we thought she was good enough or not, there was a moment there where I thought...
She wasn't.
No, but I thought...
rubbish.
I was like, but the problem for him is, apart from the fact that he has no plan and has basically invited too many people's opinions and now doesn't know which way to turn, you get rid of your chancellor, it's odds on your next.
You're next. Exactly right.
And I don't, and I say it right here and now, I don't believe either of them will be there in 12 months.
Yeah, but
and I believe
that was incredibly difficult.
I know what you're going to say.
Hang on, wait.
And Angela Rayner will be the next Prime Minister.
But before we get down to that one, though,
that's mental.
Consider the situation, because afterwards, obviously, the whole of Westminster went mad. It was like, why has Rachel Reeves burst into tears? What's going on? Has she offered her resignation? Was the first question. He said no, so that was denied. It then came out that supposedly the reason she was crying, according to Downing Street, was of some kind of personal matter, which they didn't elaborate on. So we have no idea.
Personal matters, as in she learned how she lost her job.
Well, it could be that.
The thing is, we don't. Something more than that.
It could be something. The only thing I would say is that if there was something really serious that was happening in your personal life, I don't really care what your job is. You wouldn't go and sit in front of an audience like that.
But
surely.
you said to me off camera, you're right.
Because if she hadn't been there, you can imagine what would have been said. People would have said, well,
damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
But a really difficult watch, wasn't it?
So it was really difficult
to see
watch,
somebody in distress.
Because you don't like to see anybody, for as much as we've slagged off Rachel Reeves, she's been a terrible Chancellor, he's been a terrible Prime Minister. Yeah, you don't want to see people in their jobs being made to feel like that.
I actually find myself warming to Starmer and becoming incredibly fond of him when I think of the blimmin' alternative. I mean, if Angela Rayner becomes Prime Minister of this country, she's obsessed with this Islamophobia law, I'm out. I'm gone.
Yeah, well, you've got plenty of places you can move to.
She is not only thick, she's dangerously thick and massively ideological. And
she's also quite a clever politician, though.
Be.
No, but she's also quite a clever politician, and she's
certainly
ruthless. She's clever enough to run rings around the entire Labour Party.
Yeah.
She would definitely get in there.
She's well savvy. Oh,
now let's lighten things up slightly. Reform put out a rather interesting tweet this week, and this was about all the U-turns that Labour has performed under Sir Keir Starmer.
With 12 months of Keir Starmer just around the corner, it's time for a party.
Good morning.
It's here and bigger than ever.
You're as cold as ice.
Who could forget this?
We don't need your money, money, money.
What an absolute classic.
Another one bites the dust.
This was unforgettable.
I want to break free.
To celebrate 12 months of Sir Keir Starmer. Now that's what I call U-turns.
If they'd had it, right, just like the general election, basically Reform were killing it on social media. But if they'd had that picture of Starmer tripping as he came out, that would be the end of that particular thing. But it's been a complete disaster. I mean, this is the week that is the 1 year anniversary. As you watch this, it's actually today, it's Friday night, July the 4th. And you can't believe quite how bad, everybody says it. Everyone that I know who's worked in Parliament, they've never seen anything as bad as what happened this week with the welfare bill, when it started off as something that was going to save us $5 billion, and instead it's going to cost a minimum of $100 million. It's so useless, it's so hopeless, and everything they do just turns to absolute crap.
The problem is that I see now is either he's got to go very much to the hard left, because that's what the backbenchers are demanding of him to save his premiership, or he goes and he gets replaced by Angela Rayner on the hard left.
But then I think then the whole
absolutely screwed.
Yeah, but then the whole edifice. I think the whole edifice comes crumbling down. I've been saying this. Jeremy knows this. I've been saying this since about August of last year.
The government will collapse.
The whole thing will collapse. Yeah, because it's so bad that it will become a fiscal crisis in this country.
Oh, I reckon
there will be
the IMF.
There will be an economic crisis to such an extent that there will have to be a general election. I just think
I find it from a personal point of view, him, and this is me at my most rational. And you talk about Rayner. It amazes me that a man who has no political antennae, cannot smell a vibe, there's nothing that tells me that he understands or senses that you spend all that time knowing you're going to be the Prime Minister. Do you think it's OK that you're going to get away with screwing pensions, you're going to get away with upsetting, veterans, or that you can say to disabled people, we're not giving you any benefits, but we're going to still wipe the backsides of people coming to this country. He's supposed to have all these people around him, and yet there is nothing in him that makes me think. And all the best leaders always end up killing themselves like Thatcher and Blair, but at least they went there with some conviction, even if I didn't agree with what they say. I want somebody to say, this is what I think, like Trump, this is what I'm going to do. He's an over-promoted lawyer, and it's frightening.
There's no humanity, is there? That's the thing. When he came into Virgin Radio, and I shook his hand, and he kind of just looked straight through me.
Was it a strong handshake? No, I bet it was wet.
Do you know what?
I just remember his eyes and just thinking there's nothing there. Yeah. There was no kind of feeling or compassion.
No, it's kind of vacant.
Or just anything.
It's like a cyborg.
It's like Kevin O'Sullivan when he shakes your hand.
A bit like, I've never shaken hands with him, I don't think.
I tried.
Let's have a look at young Keir.
I do think it's time that the court system became much more of a place where the ordinary person feels they can go, and I think that means stripping judges and lawyers of their wigs and gowns and making it much more like a GP's health centre.
Yeah, great. So when
you can't see a GP.
Well, you can't see one. So when you turn up at the law courts, you'll go, any chance of a case today, Your Honour? But he's always been a geek. That's the point. And geeks go into politics. Unfortunately, he's like king of the geeks.
The person who's really running this country is that Lord Hermer, mind.
Yeah.
He's the one who's actually in charge.
Harmer, I call him. Right. Anyway, Jeremy, over to you. Abdul Rauf.
I want to do one of these programmes and smile and be happy. But, you talk about a year and then you talk about something that I think is probably the biggest national shame for...
That's putting it mildly.
And another government U-turn as well.
Yeah, I mean, we all know the horrendous, I don't call them grooming gangs, rape gang story. It was a couple of weeks ago that Yvette Cooper finally stood up in the House of Commons and said, yes, this is an issue, and this was British Pakistani men predominantly. There was a large number of illegal migrants as well, and we need to get a handle on this. But it seems that almost every part of our institution had covered this up. And I don't care what your politics, as a father, that's an utter disgrace. And yet, we read story after story, Stevie. And this week, convicted paedophile Abdul Rauf. He was the leader of the Rochdale grooming gangs, who was jailed in 2012, but he only served 2 years because he was going to be deported, has used £285,000 of your taxpayers' money, ladies and gentlemen, whilst fighting his deportation to build, are you ready for this? To build a house in Pakistan. For presumably when he is deported or when he's fleeced this flipping country of everything he can get. And you look at that picture, and I know Chuck will say, Jez, chill. He shouldn't be on the streets. He's in the same frigging street where the children live. Honestly, Mike, that to me is... I can't have it.
They're evil. They're actually evil. And I'm sick to the back teeth with Pakistan now. Do you know what I mean? Pakistan, we give
What are they
aid
doing
to that
about
country.
it? What are Pakistan doing about it?
What are they doing? We should be saying every single one of these people are going to be deported. You're taking them on no more aid for you. You're going to help us set up regular PIA flights to take all these people back. And when they get to your country, you can do what you like.
Well, do you remember those MPs from Birmingham who were lobbying in Parliament to try and get money and a campaign going for a special airport in Mirpur, which is where these rape gangs come from? Yeah. That's where they come from. Yeah. So they can have a sort of a hotline straight into Britain. Why not, maybe you could just fly into Leeds Bradford Airport.
If you step back from that as a society to say, we're allowing... Forget the fact that he's... I don't care. We're allowing a man who raped an 8-year-old girl over a period of time with his mates to live in the same street where those girls whose lives are blighted forever are still living with their families. Yeah. That's how mad we've become.
It's crazy.
That's so wrong crazy. And right. Simple there.
We know from the Casey report that there's a significant amount of asylum seekers who have been involved in these grooming gangs, and yet still to this day these people are coming over and we are paying for them to be in hotels, have driving lessons, have food,
trampoline lessons,
wellness,
yoga classes, all of this stuff, and we treat our own people like the scum of the earth. We haven't got any money, black hole this, welfare cuts that. Do you know where I'd begin? I would begin with anybody who wasn't born in this country. We don't owe anyone who's not born in this country anything. It's really blimmin' simple. Like, I don't need to invite all the homeless people of Britain.
You're gonna think I'm not going soft at all. I think you also have to touch your cap to the people who come to this country and build and create and employ and create money. And I think you have to differentiate. You are dead right about the people who arrive here and take the...
Yeah, when they've come and contributed to the economy, they have children. Those children are British citizens. It's very easy. I don't do this whole...
I always think about our makeup artists. They've come here and built a business. They work like dogs. They are more appalled, let me tell you, our makeup artists, about what illegal migrants do than they are probably the British people are.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really important point to make.
It is, absolutely, because, of course, more and more people who have come here illegally are putting more pressure on the people who have come here legally and work their way through and pay their taxes.
And are proud to be in this country and thank this country for giving them the opportunity.
Yeah.
That's what I like.
Absolutely. Anyway, let's lighten the mood slightly. The Bank of England, always good for a laugh.
So, you know, like the only way that stops us all seething and going mental and starting an insurrection is DEI.
Winning the lottery.
Right? No, it's DEI. DEI, you know, we're constantly told and gaslit that all these things are very important. Diversity is the strength of our nation and multiculturalism is the backbone of Britain and blah, 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 blah. And so instead of the Bank of England going, right, we're going to, hot off the press this year's new currency, we're going to, keep... Alan Turing and William Shakespeare and Winston Churchill. No,
we have to change all that, don't we?
That's too white. That's divisive. Money is divisive. It's like, no, we're going to get rid of all this. We're going to have diversity on our banknotes.
Oh, are we?
So I was literally lying in bed this morning with the other half. Don't get jealous, Jez. I was. We're lying in bed.
Whose other half? Yours?
Yeah, his.
No.
Wow.
We were all three of us were lying in bed.
Was Ian Collins with you? Because he's got a bit of a thing about Mrs.
He's off today.
All 10 of us.
He's off today. She's gone out for the day. Yeah.
Oh, is it? Yeah. So we were reading the newspapers, and I sort of went, oh my God.
Maybe that's why you're not
Nicholas,
pregnant.
Yeah, I know. Clearly there's a problem with this, isn't there, this system? Anyway, and Nicholas like, what is it? And I said, oh, guess what the Bank of England are doing? They're going to get rid of all the sort of people you'd expect to be on a banknote and replace it with diverse stuff.
Right. I suppose it's better than getting rid of the banknotes altogether, which is what you might expect them to be doing soon when they get the cashless society. And you go, who needs money? You know.
And I said to him, not being rude or anything, but if they're going to go diverse, who are they going to put on that banknote?
Isn't Paddington?
And putting a
Paddington.
bear.
Paddington Bear's going to be on.
Is he?
Isn't he?
Is it Harry Potter as well? I'm sure if anyone, I was surprised that Harry Potter's name was put in there because I thought,
what is this? Fisher Price making money for children's monopoly.
No, but hang on. Surely somebody will object because of J.K. Rowling's views on women.
But I said to Nicholas, I'm really trying to think.
Some and you're on the 50.
Oh, really?
Yeah, MG's on the 50.
Let's have a look and see what we've got for that, because I may have beaten you to it, actually.
Oh.
Love it.
Not funny hair there. Don't
That's exactly, you see, I thought we'd created that.
Well, I don't know where that came from.
You had a shock.
I look as if I've just been shot. I mean,
that's brilliant.
I'm not sure that... You don't actually look like you.
Doesn't look like me. Also, that's a very old-looking note,
Did you enjoy the colonic irrigation?
Not particularly. But the 10 of your English pounds.
I said to Nicholas, if this is going to be all diversified, who are they putting on that? Because I'm like, I said, seriously, I'm sitting here trying to think of who it might be. And I'm like, the most famous person I can think of at the moment, just popping in my head, is Lenny Henry. And he was like, no.
Eddie Izzard, wasn't it? It'll be Eddie Izzard.
Maybe it'll be George Floyd.
I saw someone's been using Grok to make examples, and I've seen that one.
Diane Abbott.
But yeah, no, so this is what Nicholas said. He's like, well, she was the first black female MP, wasn't she? It's going to be Diane Abbott. And I'm like, well, she can't even add up. What's that going to be on the £11 note?
Exactly. Blimey. Crikey. Anyway, listen, that's us for another bit. We've got some more coming up, though. Do you remember when Jaguar changed their tune and decided they didn't want to sell nasty, masculine cars anymore? Well, we're going to tell you what happened to their sales coming up next on Plank of the Week.
Live from London, it's Plank of the Week with Mike Graham.
Welcome back to Plank of the Week. It's time for me, once again, to give you one of my nominations, and I'm going to go with Jaguar, or Jaguar Land Rover, or as Keir Starmer likes to call them, JLR. You know, because remember when he went up to the factory there and shook hands with loads of people and made out that he'd sort of saved their careers because apparently a lot of people like buying Jaguars in America. But after this advert change, remember the advert change? Let's remind ourselves of what they did to the brand. So, as you might remember, Jeremy, they did away with not only the whole image of Jaguar and the way that the leaping Jaguar actually was the kind of the mark, if you like. They did away with the growler. Remember that? Because I didn't know that's what it was called. I didn't know that's what it was called.
What's a growler?
I know you've not met them before, but...
The badge.
If there is a what?
It's the badge.
I thought you said something else.
No,
then for a moment. Can I just say?
The badge.
I am going slightly deaf. I thought he said started that way. If you wanted to ask one person what a growler was in this audience, it would be Steve Denyer.
It would.
That's brilliant.
So, anyway, the thing that appears... If you actually have it... I used to have a Jaguar, and it's the thing that... Because they stopped the leaping Jaguar, because they decided it was too dangerous, and they ran over people, and they'd get sort of, impaled on it. So it's basically the badge of the thing. But they changed the writing. They changed everything about it. But guess what's happened to their sales? You know how many cars they sold in April 2025 in Europe? Jaguar, the massive multinational company. 49. I mean,
wow.
That's terrible.
That's
right?
done.
They've lost, basically, their sales have dropped from 1,961 units sold during the same month the previous year. So they've actually lost 97.5% of their sales.
Is that
97.5%.
Is that where the advert was portentous, where there was a load of people sitting there going, where's the blimmin' car?
Yeah.
I thought the rock was... I'm being honest, I thought that rock, as they left, was gonna grow and the wheels were
Yes,
gonna
I thought that.
Not the size of a bloody car. How would I know that was a car?
I know.
It makes me very sad, actually,
It is
because
sad.
Jaguar is one of my favourite car marks.
It's iconic,
that's ever
isn't it?
existed.
Iconic.
And they've turned it into that horrible font, the Fisher-Price font, and all these weird people who like they're in the Socialist Workers' Party.
And all of that for political correctness, and you've lost your business.
Why do all
Remember when
these
Gerald
people
Ratner said, my jewellery's
exactly
crap?
right.
Cheap, reliable, affordable product.
And if you remember, Elon Musk actually sent the CEO of Jaguar a note on Twitter, and he asked him, do you actually sell cars? Because there's nothing in that advert that would suggest that you can sell cars. And then they put out these ridiculous-looking things that look like, Lady Penelope's car from Thunderbirds.
Boxes.
The pink boxy thing.
Yeah, they looked at their made from cereal packets.
And you just wouldn't
on
want to drive
how
around.
I had a
to.
crush on her.
Unbelievable.
Who?
What, Lady Penelope? Yeah, I don't blame you.
And Florence from the Magic Roundabout.
Yeah, that's a bit weird. Steve, over to you. Universities, it says here.
£16 million of taxpayers' cash being spent on very, very strange kind of, I suppose, woke university projects. Can I read a couple?
Yeah, go on.
For you. So you've got 260 grand spent on is a city tour app exploring whiteness in statutes.
Whiteness?
So various kind of, how many white people are represented in statutes around. Right. There would be quite a lot because of the times, when these statutes...
When people were mostly
around, were mostly white. You've also got money being spent to help women who are called witches through witchcraft. And songs that people can sing in order to help this out. So less curses, more verses, that kind of thing. A lot of money here, but 16 million.
Didn't they have something like this in Scotland for a while ago when they had some kind of pardon for a load of witches? I'm pretty sure they had it.
There was something, wasn't there?
Because they used to burn them at the stake and stuff like that. Or
they did.
Or dunk them in the water. And if you floated, you were killed as being a witch, and if you sunk, you drowned.
Apparently, it's a
Can
problem.
you swim, Alex Phillips?
Yeah. But, I mean, everyone knows I'm a witch anyway.
Some people are. I mean, I used to know a white witch, actually.
Very witchy.
Yeah, very witchy.
That.
Yeah.
Why are you saying white?
Well, she called herself a white witch because I think there are black. Because there are black witches who I think are, evil. And I know that, and then white witches
I'm
white witches who are good.
in my witchery.
Yeah.
Apparently, there's a problem with women who age in South Africa being abused and called witches because of their lines and being old and stuff.
Botox is a great thing.
What's that got to do with Newcastle University?
Injections.
Anti-witch injections.
I think we've got some witches to have a look at. Have a look at this.
I'm just a mean green mother from outer space, so get off my back, get off my face, because I'm mean and green, and I'm bad.
Now, that's before the Wicked,
That was my childhood, Mike.
What was that?
That's Grot Bags. So
What's
if anyone
Grot Bags?
remembers
I don't remember
Rod
that.
Hull and Emu...
I remember Rod Hull and Emu.
Grot Bags was kind of the baddie witch who would knock on the door and everyone would say there's somebody's at the door.
I thought that was Miriam Margolis. The said go on the Jonathan Ross show or
I
something.
thought that music was Audrey 2 from Little Shop of Horrors.
Yeah, well, I guess we all
I
thought it
don't
was something
remember that.
different.
That was my childhood.
I've never heard of Grot Bags, but there we are. Coming up, we're going to decide who's won Plank of the Week, but I've got one more to do, and it's a politician, I'm afraid. Not a witch. I don't think so, anyway. It's Plank of the Week.
Live from London, it's Plank of the Week with Mike Graham.
welcome back to Plank of the Week, the final furlong, as I like to call it. Andrew Gwynne, does anybody remember him? Andrew Gwynne MP.
Yes.
Does it ring a bell?
Yeah,
he was a Labour MP, one of the many scandals of the past year, who had to be suspended from the party, I think, on the basis that he had been found to be writing WhatsApp messages about hoping pensioners drop dead so that they wouldn't have to worry about them not voting for them. And then it turned out he'd said all manner of awful things as well, some of them quite anti-Semitic and some of them quite nasty. He's still apparently yet to hold a by-election because I think Keir Starmer doesn't want him to have a by-election because he's bound to lose it to Reform. And that'll be another
Where's the
MP.
seat?
Yeah, where's the seat?
It's somewhere in the northwest, I think. I should know the answers to that. But he put out something this week. This is why we decided to make him a plank. Making out that he attended Armed Forces Day. Let's have a look at the picture of him at Armed Forces Day. Because, of course, everybody likes to think that they're supportive of our armed forces. It's a very nice thing to do. Unfortunately for him, the Armed Forces Day in the background looked very similar, or rather he looked very similar in a different picture. Let's see the other picture. That's the other picture, where he wasn't at Armed Forces Day. I'm afraid he was at another event. So he basically pretended he was at Armed Forces Day. He put a different background in.
Superimposed?
Yeah. So he's AI'd himself to be at Armed Forces Day. Which seems completely and utterly ridiculous, isn't it?
Was he still sort of hankering after a return to the limelight?
I think it just shows you that some politicians, unfortunately, go into the business of politics because they're sort of such narcissists and double dealers that they literally couldn't lie straight in bed. You know, so he thinks that's OK. There was one the other week who pretended that she'd gone to a fish and chip shop in her constituency to celebrate World Fish and Chip Day or something. And she put out a tweet saying, really had a great time, took my entire team to this lovely fish and chip shop in wherever it was. And it turned out it wasn't open that day. You know, and you just think you're not even smart enough to check that the place is open.
I mean, that would be... That's just bad.
It's just dim, isn't it?
Schoolboy.
So Andrew Gwynne is also dim.
Gwynne Dim.
He's now an independent MP. He's not in Labour anymore because he's been kicked out. But I mean, he should really be having a by-election.
Still being paid $100 grand a year.
And he's still the whole way
he's still
that this
picking
works.
up. He's still picking up his salary as well.
Because you've got a couple now, haven't you, being arrested on funny charges? They were holding on to their seats with white knuckles. I'm like, get them out!
I know.
Get them out!
Get them out, and absolutely quite right too. So we've got to pick the winner.
You have, because it's your show and you're in charge.
That's exactly right. When I say we, I don't mean...
I'm sort of doing my bowing down to Kim.
I think it should be the BBC and Glastonbury.
I think it should be, really. I mean, I think...
I want to win 3 weeks on the trot.
You're a winner, Jez.
I mean, as hopeless as Keir Starmer is, he has won it quite a lot recently.
That Bob Vylan is a load. He's definitely...
Yeah.
I mean,
I think the BBC and Glastonbury together, I think, are the planks, because the Glastonbury people should have known what they were doing. And previous to the actual Glastonbury show being put on, Michael Eavis, you know, the guy that runs it with the big beard, the socialist who has basically hidden away in a trust fund about £80 million.
His inheritance tax.
Yeah, so that he can avoid inheritance tax to his daughter.
Whilst pontificating the whole time.
But in addition to that, before it actually happened at Glastonbury, he said, you know, everybody knows what our politics are. If you don't like it, don't come. So, I mean, you know...
I think Stevie D made the best point, actually, the whole show, when he said they will have had run-throughs, they will have had rehearsals, they will have absolutely known. I believe the BBC and Glastonbury are complicit on what happened, and that... They are. And if you're going to put Lucy Connolly in jail, then that piece of what's it should be in jail as well.
And if I was running the BBC, which obviously I never will be,
you'd have to resign.
I'd have to resign. But also, I would say, right, we're not covering Glastonbury anymore. Yeah. Let somebody else cover it. Why should we? And as licensed players, I don't think we should be paying.
Do you not think it's really funny that it's called Worthy Farm?
Yeah, I know.
Because I think it's the most unworthy thing there really is.
Absolutely.
No, but like I said, I just think we should reappropriate it and use it to house all the migrants.
Yeah.
Just,
I think that would stick it right up the virtue signalling, lefties down in the West Country.
Would you be willing to give up your £300 Glastonbury ticket this year to give a tent to a MIGO instead?
Yeah, a MIGO. That's a nice short
No,
name.
I call them MIGO.
Is it time for us to go?
It is time for you all to go.
Did you like what I did there?
I do.
Yeah.
I did like
Come
that.
on, mate, you need to go.
We go.
Right, now, Plank of the Week goes to the BBC and Glastonbury. It's a kind of a joint win.
Well done, Jez.
Well done, everybody. Well done, everybody. Can we just say, it took an 80-year-old Rod Stewart to show everybody how to do it.
Yeah.
That was the other thing that was brilliant about it all. Anyway, that was Plank of the Week. We'll be back next week with more from Plank of the Week. Thank you to Jeremy. Thank you to Alex. Thank you to Steve. We'll see you soon.